Buongiorno, bonjour, buenos dias, привет, ni hao, and hello there. That's hello to the world out there from the spirit of the great Scottish poet Robert Burns. To them that don't know me, my name is Duncan Brown. To them I owe money to, my name is Tony Blair. Now there's not a lot to say or do about Robert Burns that hasn't been said or done before, I'll give you that. But I'm about to introduce you to something that has never been done before. I don't know why I'm the catalyst for it, but I am. So, having learned from everything I've done before, with good results, here goes. Observations, hints, songs, scraps of poetry, etc. by Robert Burns, and 37 paintings by me. They're from my imagination and knowledge of the life of Robert Burns, and I'm very fortunate to have been gifted with one or two gifts in my life, one of them being as an artist. Recently I was inspired, and that's the only word for it, to paint 37 images of the life of Robert Burns in just 37 days. Every day and night for the completion of 37 paintings, one for each day or each year of his short life. At the very last painting, I began to have double vision, and I was forced to stop painting. It was as though he was saying, "Okay, big man, stop right there, that'll do." The intensity of concentration was just too much, and I was glad to stop there anyway. But they were complete, and where they go from here, I have no idea. That might be up to you sitting out there now. I don't know. The Burns fraternity will be familiar with these words, which I have taken to myself and have resulted in this exhibition. Dear Duncan, I'll give you some advice. You'll take it no uncivil. You shouldn't paint the angels, man, but try and paint the devil. To paint an angel's delicate work, with Satan, there's little danger. You'll easy paint a lank-kent face, but no so real a stranger. So here goes, with my effort to bring to life some of the episodes in the life of Robert Burns. Number 1, the star of this exhibition. A mystical type of portrait of Robert Burns, brightly beaming among them all. Number 2, 3 in 1. Out of Scotland came Wallace, and out of Wallace came Bruce. And out of that great history came Robert Burns, a veritable gift to the world. If these 3 characters don't make you stand that wee bit taller, you're excused. You're obviously not Scottish. Number 3, Loch Lee. The Burns family moved to the dreadful ground called Farmland at Loch Lee in 1777. Mount Oliphant was previously bad, but this was even worse. I sometimes think in this day and age that we don't know what hard work is. Number 4, Tiamus. In November 1785, Robert was ploughing in a field at Moskiel when he turned over the nest of a wee field mouse. As hard as his own life was becoming, he was distraught at the violence and destruction which he had accidentally brought on this tiny creature. The mouse would have to start all over again to build its house and provide for its family, and he knew how hard that process was. but as hard as it might be, Robert wrote, "Still, thou art blessed compared with me. The present only touches thee. But och, I backward cast my ye on prospects dear, and forward though I canna see, I guess and fear." Number 5, the lambs. I would have thought living so close together for so long could only have brought humans and animals to a mutual trust and respect of each other. But I'm only a townie. What would I know? Number 6, farm horses. The animals that were used for work in the fields not only shared the field with them, they shared food and living quarters with the whole family, under the same roof, 24 hours a day. Take a look sometime in the old cottage in Alloway. See what I mean. Number 7, the plaid. Robert wore a saffron coloured plaid, unlike any other in the village, they said. He also tied his hair at the back, so unlike any other man or boy. In more ways than one, he stood out from the crowd. Number 8, the likeness. There have been too many to mention arguments about the true likeness of Robert Burns over the years. But his son, Colonel William Burns, who had a good career in the army in India in the mid-1800s, and a photograph of his portrait 50 odd years after his father died, should tell you all you need to know. Place your thumb over a colonel's forehead where he's losing his hairline, and then tell me that you don't see the likeness. Number 9, Jeannie Mauchline. Just my imagination running wild with a bonnet from the time period encompassing a pretty face. There's a good pipe tune called Jeannie Mauchline, which refers to Jean Armour. Number 10, Holy Willie. My own vision of the creature called William Fisher, better known as Holy Willie. This patronising, self-righteous, debauched lecher took great delight in ruining people's lives through the church. But Burns set him up and hung him out to dry for the rest of the world to see the delightful truth of it. Like it or not, his kind are still here. And watch out, he's behind you. Number 11, the lover. He had it all: looks, charm, physique, talent, intelligence, but he also paid for it all in abundance in his short life. It wasn't fair, really. Number 12, Baby Elizabeth. The servant lass called Bess Painton comforted Robert on the night his father died, and from that relationship came his first wee baby, called Elizabeth. He looked after every one of his children in equal part with words like these: "Welcome my bonny sweet wee dochter, though ye come here a wee unsocht for. And though you're coming I have fought for, baith kirk and queer, yet by my faith you're no unwrought for, that I shall swear." Elizabeth grew up and married a man called John Bishop, and she died in childbirth in 1817. His children. They used to say that you knew Burns had been in Edinburgh because his face was looking at every pram in the high street. I suppose you might liken him to a kind of Scottish Jesse James. James was blamed for every train robbery in America at one point, but obviously it wasn't him. Equally so, in a sense, the same about Robert Burns. We know he was a father of 13 children, but saying the words and seeing the image are two different things. My own grandparents had 9 children, as did a lot of people in those days. But Robert paid for and looked after every single one of them. So unlike many other guilty fathers of the day who would deny their own. Number 14, the musician. He did play the violin, though not a great musician, but many a tune was played on it, and his contribution to the world of music was probably greater than that of his poems, when you see the list of tunes he wrote and saved for the nation. He met the great fiddler Neil Gow in August 1787. They shared a few drams and hours together, and they talked about the music. Gow was amazed at Burns' knowledge of Scots song. He would have preferred to stay another day or so with him, but his travelling companion, a man called Wally Nichol, was forever tearing Robert away from interesting people to carry on with that Highland journey. 15. Music. Consider how difficult it would have been to write down music in his day. He didn't have paper like we do today. There was no such thing as a ballpoint pen to write under an electric light either. Different days for sure. Number 16, Highland Mary. After Jean Armour denied him for fear of her father, Robert met Mary Campbell and fell in love with her. They each made plans to emigrate to the West Indies and resolved to meet up at the port of Greenock after affairs were settled with their respective families. Robert went to the port only to discover that Mary had died there waiting for him. Of a fever, they said. His pangs of guilt and remorse stayed with him for the rest of his life. Number 17, Book of Poems. July 1786, Robert has his first book of poems published in Kilmarnock. Must have been a great thrill for him to experience holding an actual book of his writings. Number 18, Tam O'Shanter. Burns wrote this over the course of one day, a terrifying incident of a drunk man on his way home who happens on the horrors of hell at Old Alloway's haunted kirk. It's so brilliantly told that Sir Walter Scott is said to have remarked that it was the best day's work done in Scotland since Bannockburn. Number 19, Willie Wassell. I never heard or saw a better description of one so ugly as Willie Wassell's wife. Burns could certainly paint with words when you read this poem. The character in the portrait depicting Willie Wassell is my old friend Willie Mackintosh, who could recite it so well. Willie will now be sharing a dram and a story with Rab somewhere in the great beyond. Number 20, Ye Jacobites by Name. A great old song, still rousing us all these years later. Burns would have known people who were involved in the Jacobite rebellion then, just as we know people who were involved in the Second World War. He was born just 11 years after the rebellion and was known to have been a Jacobite sympathiser. And in his day, that was a very dangerous thing to be. Part of his Highland tour, which took in a night in Stirling, he was in a particularly black mood about the royal house of Hanover, who sat on the British throne, and he scraped these words into a window pane at an inn there. The injured Stuart line is gone, a race outlandish fills their throne, an idiot race to honour lost, who know them best, despise them most. Number 21, The Freemason. Robert joined Lodge St David of Tarbolton in June 1781. Only from then was he provided with entry to the patronising societies of the literati. But he was equal to any of their condescending ways. He did indeed laugh at them and at himself, which confused them even more. He was the recognised genius amongst them all. But he kept his sense of humour about it when he wrote to his friend Gavin Hamilton, and he remarked that By all probability, I shall probably soon be the 10th worthy and the 8th wise man of the world. There's a great old Scottish proverb that says, they'll never beat us. And they never did beat Robert Burns. Number 22, a red, red rose. Who among us would love to be able to hand a flower to a loved one and give it inclusive of words like these? And fare thee weel, my only love, and fare thee weel a while. And I will come again, my love, though it be 10,000 miles. Number 23, Luith. Robert loved his dog Luith, which incidentally means swift. But some cruel individual killed the dog the night before his father died. He immortalised the dog by giving one of the two dogs in the poem of the same name Luith, the other being Caesar. Number 24, the two dogs. Caesar was the name he gave to the big dog who belonged to one of the gentry, and Luith was the name he gave to the other, a ploughman's dog. Both meet up in the tale and discuss between them the futility of the human race. A fantastic description from the dog's point of view of how fickle human beings can be. I love how it ends after their great debate with these words. Then up they got and shook their lugs, rejoiced they weren't men but dogs, and each took off his several way, resolved to meet some other day. Wonderful. Number 25, in a hat. The three-cornered hat was the style of the day, and I have no doubt Burns would have worn one just like this from time to time. Again, it's not an image you see often of him, but he is there under the hat. Number 26, to a haggis. He wrote the address to which we are all familiar with, but did you know he never actually liked to taste it himself? And I've piped in the haggis at many a Burns supper where the address to the haggis has been recited perfectly by some men who later on the same night couldn't tell you what their own addresses were. Number 27, approaching Edinburgh. Robert rode to Edinburgh in November 1786. The long horse ride from Ayrshire to Edinburgh was broken with an overnight stay at Thankerton, where the best of hospitality was offered. As he approached the city, his awe and wonder at the size of it must have seemed to him like a different world. Wee humorous story about his horse, whose name was Jenny Geddes. Part of a tour Robert did included a short sojourn into England, where he went as far south as Carlisle before he turned back. Somebody said he had little expectations of going into England and came back disappointed. Apparently he got a wee bit too involved at an inn there and had a bit too much to drink. He was told that his horse had been impounded for straying onto corporation land, and he would have to pay a fine to the mayor of that town to get his horse back. This he did, but not without 4 lines which he attached to the envelope with the money in it. Was ever a poet so befitted? Its master drunk, his horse committed. Poor harmless beast, tak thee nae care. You'll be a horse when he's nae mair. Number 28, Edinburgh Society. The lords and ladies of Edinburgh loved him, and he loved being famous. But he was forever kept a good arm's length from their fickle lives for fear of his superior knowledge of language and his literary skills. I often wonder if he was aware at the time of the size of his contribution to Scotland's history. Probably not. We should in turn make us aware of our own contribution to this life of ours. Number 29, Clorinda. It seems obvious to me to use the only likeness of Clorinda, which was her silhouette, and then sketch it out again and fill it in to see what she might actually have looked like. What do you think? Number 30, the Highland Tour. Although a lowlander in 1787, June through to October, Robert indulged in the beauty of his Highland country and was left with an impression he would never forget. Number 31, Burns Guns. February 1792, Burns organises and boards the capture of the French ship Rosamond and is cheered all the way back to Dumfries. The next day he pays £4 for its 4 cannons at auction. He then feels guilty about it and sends back the guns to France for the Revolution. He's then chastised and warned by his government not to make such a spectacle. Again, this image is not one of him you will often see, but it did happen. Number 32, the militia uniform. An image not often found or imagined of the poet, but he did indeed wear a uniform of the local Dumfries militia, and it was this uniform which cost him the £5 he was to beg for on his deathbed. The haberdasher who fitted him with the uniform knew that Burns was dying and so served him with a writ for the money. The dying Burns wrote to a cousin in Montrose begging him for the money to pay him. If only known that any one of 10,000 who attended his funeral a few days later would gladly have paid it for him. The Clydesdale Bank acknowledged this in our 21st century by putting his portrait on a £5 note. I think it's now on a £10 note. Maybe that's what you call inflation. Number 33. The depressive. I think Robert Burns was tormented all his life with bouts of depression, and his dependence on the human race to help him through life was a constant disappointment. These bouts of rheumatic fever were enough to bring any man down. A dreadful shame. Number 34. The funeral. He had a military funeral fit for any state occasion which he could never have dreamed of. 10,000 people lined the streets of Dumfries in silence to pay homage as the coffin was paraded through the streets on its gun carriage. Scotland and the world have been paying homage ever since. Number 35. Aboon them all. Some of my own friends and relations who have raised a glass to the national bard, Robert Burns. '36. Mystic Scotland. What would you think if you could see the image of our own dear Scotland in this present day? 37. The Vision. This was actually the very first painting I did on that first of 37 days of work. It just seems to fit so very well in here at the end. I know that Robert Burns wrote a historic poem called The Vision, but this painting has nothing to do with that. Just my own vision of him in the clouds, which I thought would make a grand mural for a ceiling somewhere in the world. It's also made a grand ending for this exhibition. So there you have it. I wonder how this work would end up after the effort of producing the paintings, which in turn reminded me of my grandfather, old Sam, who used to say to me, "You'll never plough a field, son, just by turning it over in your mind." And something else he used to say, "You're a talented wee boy, son, and people will pay you lots of compliments." That's fine, he'd say, but just remember this. Compliments are like chewing gum, son. Enjoy it, but don't swallow it. And you're not as important as you think you are either. And the size of your funeral will depend on the weather. Now, I never quite got it at the time, but it's funny and profound now at the same time. But that last line about not being as important as you think you are, and the size of your funeral being dependent on the weather, it's quite something when you think about Robert Burns and the day of his funeral, when 10,000 people turned up in the pouring rain. Now, it'll probably never happen in your day, but what would you think if you went into town today and you witnessed a funeral with 10,000 people lining the streets for one man? You'd be saying, "Whoa, what kind of contribution must that person have made to the world?" You think about that, and think about the kindest qualities that would make up any one human being, and you think about Robert Burns.
For all I'm saying, and here's a